Hey y'all, I haven't seen a lot of Swordmasters recently and I don't know why. I decided to take some time to learn this class, and for the most part it seems pretty easy to pick up and use in both classic and casuals. The biggest downside is that you have to have your inventory stocked with swords, but it turns the game into basically just hunting around for someone to fight and then slurping up all of their loot instead, which is personally one of my favorite ways to play the game. So I'm just going to briefly talk about my build and then what I learned from playing the class for a little bit. Also, Swordmaster's Q ability is absolutely ridiculous. The damage alone is enough to basically one-shot classes even in low gear. Alright, so this isn't the exact build that you're going to see in the clips later on. I just made this kit now because I've been having a ton of fun with the class and I wanted to show what perks I used and roughly around the gear that I've been wearing running into classics. And the first thing you'll probably notice is that I have absolutely zero inventory space. It's filled with swords, and that's because both of our abilities use these swords and basically get rid of them. This turns Swordmaster into a hunter-killer kind of class. You want to run around and use what is in your inventory to take down everyone else and then just steal all of their loot instead of running around and ratting through the dungeon. Unlike any other class, you also have this little setting right here where you can choose what rarity of swords you want to auto reload. So the 4 underneath your kit are what you're going to be sending out, and it'll auto reload for you so you don't have to continuously select them. I set mine to load anything common and below. I think the default is just low quality and common, but make sure that before you play you have it set where you want it so you're not accidentally throwing out a unique sword that you wanted to keep. All right, now that we've talked about our sword and inventory management, let's talk about our abilities. Our Q is Swordmaster's bread and butter. Over a couple seconds, you ready up to 4 swords that you can send out to shoot at a range at an enemy and deal a ton of damage. This damage is affected by the gear that you're wearing and the rarity of the swords that you're shooting. So rare quality swords will deal more than commons or junk loot, but I'm just using what I can get from the merchant because it's a lot cheaper and still gets the job done. All right, and your E just basically has one of your swords circle around you and deal damage to an enemy close to you over time. But one of our perks turns our E ability into a very defensive skill, and we need to make sure that we use that effectively so we're not just getting ourselves killed running into a fighter or a death knight or any other class that we're sort of uncomfortable pushing. All right, in talking about our perks, I'm building up strength, dexterity, and stamina. The strength perk is really strong because it heals you for every sword that you hit with your Q, and this can save you mid-fight. It actually did save me in one of the clips later on that we're going to show. Our dexterity perk gives us 50% critical strike chance whenever we hit somebody and deal unblocked damage. Emphasis on unblocked damage with our Q. I really think this helps us with our fighter death knight matchups since we don't really have the tankiness to go against them. And then our stamina perk turns our E into a 50% damage reduction for as long as the sword circles around us, which is also really great for those elongated matchups where we just need a little bit to save us. And I am just very quickly going to hover over my gear. For the most part, this is a budget set. I was mostly just buying everything from the buyout trades, but I did have some pieces that I just put on from my stash too. Critical strike and critical damage are some of the best rolls that you can get on Swordmaster, especially since your dexterity perk is increasing that by 50%. So once you start to get a ton of crit damage stacked up, you just turn into a walking nuke. I also got life on hit, and while I don't think this is necessarily the best for my loadout, it would be really good if I was running dual swords. It can still work with the sword and shield. Your last 2 hits with the sword and shield actually come out really quickly. Dual sword would be a lot better, but I don't really like that style of gameplay as much as I like having the shield. And I do have the Tiny Torment set bonus. I think that Tiny Torment and Storm Rage are probably the best go-tos for this class. Barrier of the Lake is another honorable mention, but I don't think that perk's really the best until you start to get 30. So I would definitely just go for either Storm Rage or Tiny Torment or both, but I just have Tiny Torment because this is a budget set and that's really easy to get. All right, let's get into the gameplay. I started with a 0 to here to try to learn the class a little bit, and then after I started to feel slightly confident, I put on some gear and just went straight into classics. If you were tired of rat druids, play Swordmaster. Pretty much 1 Q kills them, and if not, it slows them a ton, so you could land a thunderclap and then just kill them. Since Swordmasters are also building dexterity, they run pretty much the same speed as a Panther anyway, so Druids just have a pretty rough time into this class. Just be careful if they have their orb out, because they can block your Q then. And this is another clip from casuals. Basically just be careful whenever you're fighting a fighter or a death knight. I was starting to feel really strong and forgetting that I'm not in plate and they are, so I landed a really good Q at first. A tip to land them is to just run behind a wall real quick, so that way they're not expecting it, and then come back out and hit them. And at this point I did botch the melee a little bit, but I don't think that even if I did that, I would have the best chance here. What I got from this fight was to not think that I can go toe to toe with a fighter or a death knight, even if I land my Q. I still need to try to be in and out and basically just focus on charged attacks until I get my Q back. And here's a pretty bad death to a druid. Your Q is your main ability. Don't waste it like I did here. All right, so now that we learned those two things from my deaths, let's get to where I started to do well in classics, which I think was actually just the next two games. So basically what I learned is I don't just run around and try to fight people on equal footing. I'm not a fighter, I'm not a death knight, I don't do that. Instead, I need to sneak around, hear someone, wait for them to be distracted, and then go in like I did against this death knight here. And I do think that I wasted my E in this fight, but also I don't really regret it, because if he turned around, I'd rather be taking less damage, and I didn't necessarily know how low he was right here. Again, wait for them to be distracted, hit them with your Q, win the fight. That's how you play Swordmaster. That's all there is to it. Also, there's been a ton of whirlwind fighters. Make sure you block. And fighting against druids with trees that actually fight, just don't fight them within their tree range and you should be fine. If you do need to pass through, just make sure that you're blocking, or in this case, this guy actually messed up and has his trees too close together. So as long as there's nothing within the radius, they start to attack each other and just get distracted doing that, and I used that to my advantage. I also should have known better as a druid main to not try to throw a thunderclap past the tree, but I'm dumb. Alright, so here I started to kite to try to heal, and then I was going to re-engage the fight, but he actually pushed me pretty hard, and this is where I think that the Q heal saves me. Yep, 100% I would have been dead if I didn't have the strength perk. But I did use a ton of swords in that fight, and I'm deciding that I need to be a little bit more careful, and I'm actually just trying to get to one of the static exits here. But of course, we see another druid, and that's completely fine. I'm just going to try to catch him off guard, go around the corner, and see if we can kill him and then secure the extract for ourselves. But then a fighter came up behind me, and I had to fight him. Remember when I said there is a ton of whirlwind fighters right now? I did not expect this, and I should have. So we killed the fighter, but now we see the druid coming. I tried to back up and heal. I should have gone all the way through the door and shut it, but hindsight's 2020. He jumped on me and I ended up dying. Honestly, if I reset, I'm not sure with how many swords I use this game if I would have been able to take the kill, but at least I wouldn't have immediately died. All right, and that is going to be it for the video for today. So if you enjoyed the content, please just give it a like, a comment, or consider subscribing to the channel. All three of those things really help, and I appreciate each and every one of you who do it. I also have a community Discord that I'm going to have linked down in the description below. Feel free to click that, come by and say hey. And as always, I hope that each and every one of you have a very great day, and I hope to see y'all next time. Peace.